Hello and welcome to a roundtable discussion on the Comic Book Page podcast. My name is John Mayo. In this episode, I'm joined by guests for a lively conversation on a topic we hope you'll find interesting. In this roundtable discussion, I am joined by James, Sam, and Eric, and we're going to be talking about some of the recent changes in the comic book industry. Now, originally, this was going to be a discussion on that $5.99 price point and kind of that quote-unquote anthology format mini DC titles were starting to take, but then Marvel went and announced they were switching to Penguin Random House for distribution, so we'll probably cover both of those and just see where the conversation takes us. Sam, how you doing tonight?
I'm well, John. How are the rest of you gentlemen?
Doing well. Eric, how about you?
We're hanging in there just fine.
And James?
I'm fantastic. Doing well.
Cool. This is a big topic. So we've got people from all corners of the nation. You know, we got Sam out west, Eric up north, James, you're on the East Coast. I'm down here on the South in Texas. So I think we can cover all angles on this.
Yes, we can.
We're certainly representing a lot of weather right now.
Yeah, exactly. Which did you guys want to start with? The DC price point stuff, the Marvel distribution, or did something else happen when I wasn't paying attention to the news?
Well, yeah, there was another huge news story that broke today. John Romita Jr. will be coming back to Marvel Comics, but I don't know if that necessarily takes the cake over the other two topics.
He's coming back.
Yep.
That's good news. It is big news. I don't think it's as big as the other two.
Agreed. Why don't we start with the price point stuff first? I have a feeling that we're going to spend more time talking about Marvel, so let's not lose the price point discussion in what we talk about.
Okay. You want to kind of frame the issue for us, Eric?
Yeah, I can start off a little bit. So with DC's move and their adjustments with Future State, kind of the pause of their ongoing titles, and that what was supposed to be roughly like a 2-month hiatus to run Future State titles, which we are to understand were the 5G titles that had been in pre-production that didn't end up seeing themselves as 5G. There was a shift in how DC is now publishing and packaging comics for their main DC line titles, so not their black label titles. Those still remain the same with their premiere formats and their different pricing structure. But we're going to talk more about the core titles to DC Comics and how they've undergone a change coming out of Future State. What happened in Future State, again, with a lot of those 5G titles, was we saw kind of the idea of anthology books where you had a main storyline and maybe one or two backups. Not all the books had that, but some of them, especially some of the B, C, and D-list characters, started to see their appearances in an anthology-style way. And that's carried on beyond Future State now. And with that anthology format, there's a page count increase. Of course, page count increase also equals creative increase, which equals cost increase. And no company is going to eat the cost themselves. They're going to pass that on. And so what we see now is a raising of prices from DC holding the line at $2.99 to $3.99 with New 52, then coming out of that into Rebirth back to $2.99 and back up to $3.99. We then saw the addition, I want to say it started in at least 2019 with the addition of $4.99 cover stock variants, cardstock variants, that is. And then from there now we're seeing $5.99, $6.99, and even every once in a while a really big $7.99 on a Bat title or something like that. And we're noticing a pretty strong trend. Now, obviously the trend has spanned across to other publishers where Marvel for a long time has done number ones at $4.99, their big anniversary issues at $9.99. But I believe, John, we want to stick more to the DC price hike on the standard titles in the format that they're now publishing their books in. Is that correct?
That's kind of what I was thinking. I mean, to me, that's definitely a decision factor on, what titles I may or may not continue with.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of sort of an anthology format, but to me, I kind of put that in quotes because I really don't know that a backup feature counts as an anthology. But
right.
It does count as something that I may not want to pay for in my comic.
Yeah, a perfect example of this was at the most recent Wonder Woman that released, which was a new creative team. I really enjoyed the first story by Mariko Tamaki, I think her name is, and it was excellent. So we have this Valhalla pitch. We have almost like a Thor-like angle with Wonder Woman, but then you get like an all-ages Wonder Woman almost like a young adults or kids book at the back that really, I don't think that's something I would ever pick up. It's just not for me, but I feel like I'm paying for it now. It's just a little frustrating.
Well, and I think it's not just that they've got these backup features that we're paying another dollar or so for, but to your point, James, the mismatch with the main story, in that case, in terms of the target age group it seemed to be for, but also, do I really want to be spending more money on Action Comics to get a Midnighter story?
Yeah. It seems like a lot of these backups are titles that, not to talk bad about the creative teams or the characters, titles that wouldn't make it on their own, or creators who are either brand new to the industry, or I've frankly just never heard of half of them. The artist or the writer, I don't know who they are. So it's become a testing ground, which they used to do that in annuals, Marvel and DC and things like that. But now it's going into these books and I'm paying for it. But I just don't want that. I'd rather have, here's a test book by these new creators, check it out.
Well, it's funny because when I started reading comics, that's when they did the same sort of backup features, and some of them were by, up-and-coming creators and stuff. So this isn't the first time DC has done this, but when it was a 40-cent book or something, it was a bit more palatable to me, and also it was a better match of content between the backup and the lead.
Yeah. I think another one that came out, it had a backup of Robin, the new I can't remember what the book was that came out.
The reason you can't remember what book it was is it was first, I think, in Batman and then over in Detective, or vice versa. It was in two different titles, and then both of them just to spin out into the Robin series they're starting.
That's what it was. Yeah, it's Detective Batman, and I couldn't remember. I was like, and what's weird is it was just build up for a title that was coming out anyway, so I guess it's a preview of a title. It just seemed a little odd.
Well, it's a clear sales ploy to tease us and get us interested in the title, but I think the higher price point is going to push out some readers, and this move seems like it could potentially really hurt DC print sales. And at the very least, it's going to get me to look closer at which titles I'm getting, why I'm getting them, how much they're costing, and do I really want to pay that additional fee for material that I probably wouldn't have otherwise gotten?
Yeah, it's true. I don't think Eric goes through and looks at my order every month. But when I do submit it, I used to always get the variant covers with DC because I thought they were cool, a different artist. The art was a little better to me. When it went to the dollar, I bought maybe a couple of them, and now I don't buy them at all anymore. So price does matter to me a little bit. So it's not only the dollar for the variant cover, now it's the dollar for this extra material that sometimes I don't want that. And then that main story has to be that much better for me to stay on it.
Well, and I think part of what really kicked off the topic on the Slack channel was when I forget which it was, something came out indicating it was going to be $5.99 for all of these things. And that seems to have been retracted, been a misprint or whatever, and it's $4.99 for most of them. But, I mean, at that point, $5.99 is more than I'm willing to pay for about a 32-page or even 40-page comic if I'm not close to 100% satisfied with the content.
Right.
And if I'm pretty uninterested in that backup feature, then by definition, I'm not close to that 100% satisfied with the contents before even reading it.
No, I know exactly what you mean by that. And price does affect us because I used to be the reader who was all in on Aftershock. Mm-hmm. And Aftershock Comics recently changed their number ones to $4.99. The subsequent comics are $3.99. But because of that, I'm almost all out. There might be one here and there that I get, but that's it.
We've definitely seen some changes in how readers approach DC Comics. There's no doubt about that, with both the price change and the content change. And in the store, it feels like the bigger adjustment is actually around the content changes as opposed to the price change, because I think most everyone has that kind of repetitive nature to them, the circadian rhythm, and I buy Batman, or I buy Action, or I buy Green Lantern. And so, that part isn't as easy to break, but when there's additional content in there that people read and it's just not interesting to them, not necessarily because it's poorly written, but maybe because, like you said, John, it's a character that either doesn't really fit with the overall tone of the main story, or it's just something out of left field that people don't really have an attachment to, that's what gets them to start thinking differently. And unfortunately can result in them saying, I'll just wait. And I don't know if we want to kind of talk about some of the other things going on at DC related to what they're printing and where they're creative focus is right now, because it's not necessarily fully on single issues. They've really doubled down and decided that digital first and the young adult market is really where they want to start to move their way into. So we see a scaling back of a number of titles, a number of printed items, SKUs in their floppy comics, but we're starting to see more, I guess, digital first to graphic novel printings and those types of things creeping up. So it's kind of all part of that part and parcel of, I don't know if it's probably Warner Media, I guess would be the best way to say it, Warner Media's shift since they were acquired by AT&T and their designs on how they want to approach the market.
How many of these digital first do they have going right now? Because I think Challenge of the Super Sons is digital first. I'm thinking the Batman Second Son thing was digital first, but is going to hit print. Sensational Wonder Woman, Truth and Justice, I think, is another one. How many others do they have going?
Oh, that's a good question.
Quite a few.
Let's see. Yeah, it's hard to keep track of all of them because they don't really cross-pollinate them into the print media, which is where we focus because that's what we're selling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, to Eric's point, in the most recent previews, or not previews, DC Connect came,
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is digital.
Yeah. One thing I did notice in there, like, they are going young adults. They had like the first 6 issues solicited were Fortnite mixed with Batman, which is Fortnite's a game that, tends to be younger kids playing it.
Is that a younger kids initiative or more of a kind of licensed property crossover kind of initiative? I guess
that's what I don't know.
Put that in a different category than some of the other things they've done with like the Raven and Beast Boy kind of things that are clearly aimed at young readers. And I've got nothing against young readers. I think trying to get them into the hobby and stuff is a good thing. Where I get worried is when they are doing so many of these things that it's not just they're targeting the comic to the young readers, they're changing the property as they do that. Batman and Superman as high schoolers and stuff. To me that's just, it's something of a different property at that point.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Some of those young adult books that came out were like that.
Yeah, and I guess the interesting thing, and something we've talked about time and time again, whether it be on recordings that are shared or just as we talk as people, independently, a lot of folks that got into comic book reading were younger when they got into comic book reading, and the books weren't written down for them. The art wasn't stylized differently for them, but the tones of the books, some were positive, some were negative, some were neutral, but the way that they were written was done in a more, I guess, all-age fashion where, you didn't have to worry about, geez, that's a lot of gore and violence right there, and, those types of things. And so I always wonder, we've got, for DC, you have the black label, where creators can be a little bit more edgy, can go a little bit darker, and, things like any one of those magazine-size items that came out, the Joker Harley Quinn, Batman Damned, all of those types of things. Why can't the bulk of the content stay there, and instead of having 2 distinct lines of your comic books, one for adults and one for kids, why can't you focus more on how do we make this material more consumable by all? That's just something that's really perplexed me, considering where a lot of comic book readers started from.
Yeah, but I think that's a trend we've seen over the decades, that as creators have gone from being fans to being creators, they've wanted to kind of have the material age with them, become both more sophisticated and in some cases just simply more mature. And I do think we've lost a contingent of readers and such. And I think it's a different factor back again when these were, 50 cents, $1, $1.50 or whatever. But as you start hitting that $3.99, $4.99, $5.99 price point, I mean, that's a much harder thing to sell somebody on when instead of getting a full story of some sort, even if it was only 17 pages, now you may be getting 22 pages, but it's, a sixth of a story or something in the installment.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hitting the price point where literally if you get 2 DC or 2 Marvel comics, you're paying enough that you could get and save money by signing up for the Marvel Unlimited stuff or the DC Universe Infinite plan. Even if you're doing the month-to-month plan, certainly you could save a ton if you're doing it on the monthly or the year plan. It works out cheaper per month. So I don't know that they're really trying to push people digital, but I think the end effect is some people are switching to digital as, a factor on this.
Yeah, and I'm not going to deny that because that's obviously happening. But what we notice in the store is that what the shift is doing is it's taking money out of DC and putting more of it in Marvel and Independent.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, so John, you've been in our store, so you kind of know how we have our new books laid out. We've got kind of the rack for the new of that week, but then we've got the wall that has roughly the last 6 to 8 weeks worth of new books. And we have 4 foot by 8 foot segments of racking that span all of those books. And it was 2 Marvel, 2 DC, and 1 Indie. And actually, as of the beginning of this week, we went through and restructured it, and DC doesn't have enough titles to support 8 feet tall by 8 feet wide worth of racking. So they're down to 1. So it's 2 Marvel, 1 DC, and 2 Independents. And, to us, that's a problem, in a sense, when your number 2 publisher is shrinking so much that you don't even have enough books to stock their footprint.
Well, and the signal that would send to some people is that Marvel is clearly the dominant publisher.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, they are. Let's not, mince words on that. But when you've at least got a similar number of titles in a similar physical footprint in a store, it at least feels like they're closer to neck and stuff, versus it paints the picture that DC is a has-been. And I'm not trying to say that they are, but it can give that impression. Add to that how everybody seems much more excited about the Marvel films than the DC films and stuff like that, and it becomes just a bad kind of mindset to be giving readers and such.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And you add into things, I don't think that Future State necessarily helps, because everybody, it's that whole thing. Readers, it's harder to bring readers on than it is to let them leave. And certainly Future State was a jumping off point for a lot of people for various reasons. The 2-month hiatus basically signaled to them, well, hey, they don't care, I don't care, on some people's mind. And others, there was a creative change that, well, I don't really like that creator so much, or I only jumped onto Action Superman because Bendis was there. Vice versa the other way. A lot of people excited about Tom Taylor's Nightwing in the store. So it can work both ways, but I think there were just so many things stacked up against where we're at right now, with a reduction of titles, with an increase in price, with, a 2-month halt on the core titles. There's just a lot of headwinds going into it right now for DC.
It's almost self-inflicted wounds. They've done this to themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think the 2-month gap on Future State with are we going to get a reboot after it, are we not? And there's some cases where they seem to be picking up like nothing left, happened or changed during that time. In other cases, it's a fairly big difference. And it's kind of a damned if they do, damned if they don't situation. I think that really self-inflicted wounds is a really good way to kind of assess DC's state right now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I like to see a big, strong DC, and I feel like there's potential there. There's even potential with the creators they have, even though some would say there's been a downgrade on some of it. But I've enjoyed some of the new books. I picked up a few more. But I am concerned for what they're doing, and if they're going to really be able to bring in that new reader. I'm hopeful that they can. It's yet to be seen.
Well, but as big of a deal as bringing in a new reader is, I think the bigger deal is maintaining the existing reader.
Which they're not currently.
They are not.
But, and this is kind of where I fall on it, and I haven't bought a floppy in a few years, no doubt about it. But, and it's not just DC, it's Marvel, it's the industry. The comic shop is not a place for readers. It is a place for collectors. And if you're going, how many months when we were still doing mail reports, why is this, oh yeah, it had this many variants, it had this many variants, it had this. If you want to read comics, you subscribe to a digital service, you get trades, you get hardcovers. If you want to get involved in the weird world of collecting, you go to the comic shop. Which is why things like the YA graphic novels and stuff don't bother me, because that's going after readers. The number of floppies aren't going after readers.
I agree that most ongoing titles are fairly inaccessible to new readers and such. I just don't know that the young adult titles they're doing are set up to migrate those readers as they age into the mainstream titles, because while they've got the same names on the characters and stuff, they're different characters.
They are. But the question isn't whether Comics went from being a medium for readers to being a medium for collectors. Sports cards come to mind. Sports cards are doing extremely well right now. However, you don't see a bunch of kids with baseball cards sharing them, trading them, looking up stats on them. They just don't. It's a bunch of old men spending thousands of dollars on weird, rare cards, and they're being printed that way. Go to the Topps website. You can't buy just a pack of 15 normal cards anymore. They don't exist. Literally, they do not exist. You can buy the hobby box. They come in these series, each one. I was looking at the checklist for the 2001 season. There's 330 baseball cards. There are 1,176 variants available in different rarities in those same packs. Those are the only things anyone that's buying those cards is for. The core reader isn't buying floppies. They're buying trades. They're going digital. It's just the way it is.
It's hard for me to really comment on that, given it's been a year since we've gotten any tangible sales data released. But when we had that data, the sales we were seeing on the trades did not make me think it was big enough to consider them the core readership. I think more people who were reading the stories, close to when they came out at least, was doing it on the comic book side versus the collected edition side.
You mean in the direct market?
Well, given that for the most part, we weren't seeing, comics being sold outside the direct market, yeah. And in most cases, outside the direct market, there were a lot of trades that just didn't seem to move at all.
Some didn't, some did. The book scan numbers are always interesting when they come in every year.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a variety of things in them. Just in and yes, it's anecdotal. Look on our Slack channels and the forums. The talk about individual issues is not as great as it once was, and there's a lot more talk about collected editions than there ever was.
When was it particularly great?
When I started, what was that, 10, 11 years ago, somewhere around Blackest Night?
Okay, for Blackest Night, I think there was definitely some buzz going on at that point for that story.
And also, that was the, what was that, Secret
Invasion? Yeah.
Same era. So, it's not a company thing. It worked both ways.
But when you had line-wide crossovers and stuff that was touching pretty much everything and well-received, yes, there was a lot of buzz. And I don't think the crossovers are doing as well these days, but I don't know that people are talking less about, the individual run-of-the-mill titles that honestly weren't getting a whole lot of talk on the Slack channel, or actually the forum at the time, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think from what I'm seeing, obviously being the person pulling a lot of people's pull lists, yeah, I do have a couple of people that will buy multiple copies of things, and obviously, we could consider that speculation. I know that one of my customers, there's 3 titles that they like to get 2 copies of, one so they can read and one so that they can just keep in pristine condition. But I would say 95% of the pull lists that I pull are A, predominantly single issues, and B, are just one copy and represent their reading copy. They're not ratios. Now, the other 5% comprise of a couple of people that will buy ratios as collector pieces and a couple that are wholly, trades and hardcovers. But what happens more often than not with the ratio books is it's less. Yes, obviously there's going to be that guy. We all know of guy who wants to collect every hot ratio book because it's an investment and dude's going to make tons of money in his head, and that's fine. But by and large, I think once you escape some of the larger financial hubs, New York City, maybe LA, Chicago, things like that, where, incomes aren't necessarily as high across the board, or cost of living isn't as high, you end up seeing more trends around people buying a ratio variant that they think is cool, that really speaks to them. A great example of that would be the Marvel's number 6 Lee Bermejo Silver Surfer cover. It's fantastic. Don't think it's a surprise. Everyone knows I love Silver Surfer, I love Nightwing, and I love Doctor Strange. That book was a $6.99 book, and it was a 1 in 25. I pre-sold 8 copies of that at a very fair price, but it wasn't cheap. And a lot of people bought that because they really like that character, they really like that cover. So it is an artificial collectible in that sense, but it's not like I'm also the guy that may spend money on sports cards and I'm surrounded by Upper Deck Series 2 hockey cards right now. But, it's different, right? The sports cards for me are, like you said, Sam, I'm hunting for a specific card or two of a couple of players I want. I'm not doing anything with the base cards. But a lot of people that are buying these ratios, they're buying it in addition to the reader copy that they're buying. They're not replacing it.
I'm not suggesting that the collectors aren't readers. I am suggesting the number of readers of that stuff is shrinking, and with the help of the publishers, are being directed to their subscription services and their books, not their magazine issues. And you haven't been in business as long, but what do you think your overall number of customers is? And you've expanded out differently, so you're probably, but I don't think there's probably as many people reading comics today as there were 10 years ago. And when I say that, I mean single issues. I think there are as many people reading graphic stories.
Yeah, obviously, we haven't run the store for 15, 20 years, so we don't have our own personal historical experience. And on top of that, the individual who owned the store before us, he did things differently. But he does come in quite frequently to still get his pull list of books. And we run things by him. He'll ask, how's business? And there's no sour grapes. He's very happy that he handed over the reins to us. But, he'll ask, and we'll talk to him, and we'll show him different things. And, he'll say, I've never in my life have seen this many people in the store. Even, 16 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was, when we started it, and, things were really kind of rocking high, we've never seen this many people in here. And we're seeing week in and week out more and more and more people coming in. And we're having people subscribe to 2 or 3 titles. I would say each month we're probably adding 2 to 4 new subscriptions of single issues. We do have people that are coming in looking for collected editions as well, and our collected edition sales have been strong, and we've been increasing what we carry there too. But we're just seeing it across the board. It could be a couple of things, in all honesty. It could be stimulus money and just the sign of the times. It could be the fact that a lot of people have expendable money that they would otherwise spend on going to concerts, sporting events, movies, that they don't have that avenue for right now. So that's a realism that, we have to be mindful of as we stock the store and obviously emerge out of COVID. So there's factors that go into that there, but we were seeing this growth before COVID came and shut everything down. A lot of it due to Marvel and, through COVID, specifically Star Wars, were things that really got people interested in things. And I will actually point to Star Wars as being one of the most influential in getting new people into the comic store, because a lot of those characters that are going to be coming up in TV shows and movies, they didn't get mainstream play prior to what they're going to get now. So you think about some of those Dark Horse Star Wars titles that now all of a sudden are just being mined left, right, and center for these new characters and the Clone Wars and all of those types of things that are going on. People are really looking for that material, and it's out of print. A lot of it is out of print because it's not available due to licensing handovers and printing schedules. And so we're seeing a ton of people buying issues and then signing up for the new Star Wars issues, like the new High Republic stuff. It's a whole new era. It's a whole bunch of new characters that they can join into. So, we've been seeing trends going this way for a while. I would say it's fair that the increase has been a little bit accelerated due to COVID, but we've been seeing it for a while in our store. And now that's us. And again, one store does not the market make. And the way that we do things is different. We're younger store owners than, most of the surrounding store owners to us. So we can pull a younger demographic of people who have a lot of energy and are excited. And, we'll sit down and we'll talk with them. And some of the other store owners are kind of like, yeah, I've been doing this for 25 years. Just what's your subscription titles you want? We'll get those in for you. So there's a lot of factors at play. But for us, it's been going up.
Yeah, and that could be a traditional trend. It might not be. I'm trying to think of the 15 to 20 people that were close to me that I knew that were comic book readers. And I think of that 15 people, there's 2 left reading individual issues. And there's about 10 of us that mainly read collections. And the other 2 or 3 have just stopped reading.
Yeah, but I think that's also a factor of just that group aging and stuff and having other things to be doing with their time. And we're not looking at, one narrow age group of readers as they progress through time. We're looking at how is the industry doing over time.
Mm-hmm. But the thing we heard for years is the industry is just being propped up by the old people who are still following them. That's what we've been hearing for years. Oh, no one new is coming. It's the same old people reading now that were there 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I think for us, we're seeing a big demographic shift. We're seeing high schoolers, and, quite honestly, a good chunk of it starts with manga. That's a huge thing right now in our area, kind of in that high school demographic. Maybe not so much in junior high, but, in high school, they're really starting to get into manga. And once they get in, they kind of see other things that they didn't notice before. And now they're kind of interested in this and want to try that. So, for us, the bulk of our growth is younger.
Okay, but again, isn't that more a book crowd, starting with manga?
Well, they start with manga, but they make their way into comics, and it's interesting. So
they go to comic issues, not trades.
Yep, they go to comic issues because you got to remember too. A lot of these manga readers, they may have dabbled with something like a Crunchyroll or one of those types of online subscriptions where it's more of a Shonen Jump feel, where they're getting 8 or 10 stories in one issue, and it's coming out in a sequential form. So they may be coming in to buy manga of something that they heard about that they couldn't find online, but they're already predisposed to the serialized single issue snippet version of stories. Now the challenge, and I would actually, Sam, if you could, if you haven't already, maybe you already have and you know the answer, but I'd be interested to know of the group that you have that have shifted to reading trades. I would be curious what the reasoning for that is, and I would have to put a guess out that it's one of two things. Either price point A, or B, what I think might be more likely based on what I've been hearing from certain people. They don't like the 6 to 8 issue arc and being strung along for that length of time, and they'd rather read a complete story. Like when they, quote unquote, first started reading comics, I want a story in 1 to 2 issues. And so what some of the people that I know who have been reading for 30 years, they revert back to, well, I'll just get the trade so that I have the full story and I can get closure. And I'll wait for the next trade to read that full story and get closure.
Most of the people I am referring to, and I probably fall into this group too, it started with price point, and then it quickly became, oh yeah, this is just a better way to read them anyways, because they don't write them for single issues, so why buy them that way?
And that's a very fair criticism.
Plus the prices. I gave up pretty much on Marvel when they went to $3.99, and I hung out with DC through most of their holding the line at $2.99 and gave up when they kind of went $3.99. And Marvel going to $4.99 took another group of those friends I'm referring to out. So yeah, and I think most of it started with price point. Oh wait a minute, at trades $12, $15. Why am I going to buy a $4.98, a $5 issue and $3 issues to get what I can just wait a few months for and get for $12?
Right.
Yeah, once you hit that point of thinking about the price, then you think a lot more about the content you're getting for that price, and rarely do those questions benefit the publisher.
Rarely.
I've yet to find anybody, even anecdotally, that's ever said, I was thinking about how much these things were costing and what I was getting for it, and I decided to just go whole hog in, and double down.
Yeah, price is definitely an issue. One of the people in our reading club, he went to trades specifically because of price, and it's a little bit easier to read and afford that. So it upsets him when trade prices change. And then we have another book club member who's gone just Marvel Unlimited and DC Infinite to just read those things. Is that what's called, DC Infinite?
DC Universe Infinite, yeah.
Yeah.
And I am a subscriber to both those services, and they're wonderful.
Yeah.
And as Eric knows, I still buy the occasional physical book. But yeah, it's gotten to the point where at one point I was buying a bunch of those $12, $15, $20 paperback trades. I don't do that anymore. I tend to read those on the subscription services. But yeah, those omnibuses, classic runs I really want, those I will still buy the books for.
Oh yeah, I have an omnibus addiction, so I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest. If I could basically, get a complete set of certain things in a trade or hardcover format to put on the bookcase, I'd certainly consider it. Matter of fact, there was one or two things that I would have definitely pulled the trigger on if they were still available.
Well, yeah, you and I had that discussion when we recorded the Captain America's back issue spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
Because at one point I was reading it on Marvel Unlimited, and John said, I thought you said you had the epics. And I went, oh yeah, and I looked over my bookshelf, and sure enough, there it was. And I pulled it off, and you started asking me questions. And you're like, are these all available? Maybe I should have got these. And as unfortunately Eric will tell you, the epics have not stayed in print very well.
It's getting a lot better. Marvel is like,
are they reprinting them?
Oh my gosh, omnibus, epics, you name it. They are really, really hitting the presses hard with stuff.
Okay, that's good to know, because if I had, spare bookshelf space, which I don't, but if I did, and I'm working on that, picking up the Marvel Epic collections to have kind of eventually, here's the Marvel Universe, would be cool. I'd certainly consider it if they were available for Astro City for the same reason. A couple other things, I'd like to have I think the bookcase presentation aspect is part of what I'm after there, but I think the fact that these days for, $12 a month, you can get the online services for Marvel and DC and have access to their complete digital library as it currently stands, which grows over time. It's hard to make the case that the print comics are the more economical way to read the books, but there's also something to be said of once you've paid for that print version, it's yours, versus, once that month is over, it's gone.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it, and I never had this need to just save everything. I'd throw books out, I'd donate them, I'd give them to kids. I didn't have that gene, but I know there's a lot of comic readers who just, you then have the need to warehouse. Every comic goes in a bag and a board, and now I got to find a place to put them.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
There you go. And how many of them do you go back and reread or look at again?
A lot more now that we're doing the back issue spotlights.
Fair enough.
Yeah, when people occasionally ask if we're going to go back to the weekly comic spotlight, it's like I'm getting a lot more use out of my back issues than I used to. So yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, when I was reading the book about the history of comics and they went into circulation, and as the circulation of comics kind of went down, the price naturally kind of crept up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're seeing that in a different format, but it's the same thing. Any type of change or shift, companies want them to be revenue neutral. They want the same amount of money or more to come into that division. So if we're going to decrease the amount of books we're sending out, the price of the books need to increase to keep revenue neutral. And we'll make the price go up on the most popular books, which is going to be Batman, Wonder Woman, whoever, let's say Green Lantern, but that's not one of the more popular ones, Detective Comics. But we're going to take those core titles, charge a little bit more to keep it revenue neutral, while the title count has gone down.
Well, as the circulation goes down, the content creations aren't going down. So those costs have to be now, spread across a smaller and smaller number of readers over time. It's just not a good combination.
I agree. So I'm hoping that this will be the last. I'm hoping they don't go to the $5.99 permanently, but I fear that it's not too far off.
Well, I think they could get away with a price hike, probably not the $5.99, but like $4.99 or something, if they had a better feeling of return on investment. If you felt like you were getting enough of a satisfying story and stuff like that every issue, this would be, there'd be grumbling, don't get me wrong. There's always been grumbling on price hikes. But when it went from 60 cents to 75 cents to $1 to $1.25 to $1.50, $1.95, etc., back in the 80s and 90s and such, you at least were feeling like, yeah, it's more, but I'm getting a full enough story. I'm getting enough out of the individual issue that it was not fun, but it was acceptable.
Yeah, and that's what we're not getting right now. So unfortunately, we're still getting the 6-issue trade. Here's snippets.
Yeah, and when any individual comic you could get, for the equivalent price, a fairly cheap meal at a fast food place, and then when you factor in, if you get that full story, you can actually get a decent meal at a better restaurant and stuff, and it's going to take you 6 months to get that story. I don't think the reward aspect is quite what it needs to be on modern comics.
I would agree.
But I don't see that changing anytime soon either.
Me neither.
I'll be honest, as a retailer, you don't get a lot of time to read significant amounts of books. You peruse a lot of them to catch major tones and themes, and we lean on a lot of our customers to tell us, what are you picking up out of books here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, for anyone out there who wants to be a comic retailer, I'll remind you, being a comic retailer does not mean you get to sit and read comics all day. Or if you do, you're probably not going to be in business very long. But to that end, I'm going to put the question out to John and then to you, James. If you were paying $4.99 or even $5.99 for a 40-page book, a 40-page Batman book, and it was all the same story in the book, and it was a let's not even say it's a great story. Let's just say it's a good story. Is that more palatable than $4.99 or $5.99 with a 22-page Batman story and 2 backup stories that may or may not tie in?
Absolutely, the full story is way better for me.
For me, absolutely too.
Yeah, I mean, to me, don't even think about it at all, because I'd rather have one story that's getting further to its completion or a bigger satisfying chunk or whatever than for that same price be getting 2 or in the way you'd suggested, 3, because the backup stories are going to be partial ones as a given. And so therefore, for that reading, I've now got 2 context switches in the middle of it, 3 things I've got to remember the next time I get back to that title, versus 1 more satisfying, bigger, longer chunk. As long as it's a decent enough story.
And I would say the move would be, for me, a natural move would be from the 6-issue arc to the 3 or 4-issue arc, because you're going to have enough page count in there for a trade that basically we'd be reading 3 or 4 issues but getting a full story in that 3 or 4 issues, and then I'd be completely satisfied. I probably remember it a little bit better because it didn't happen 6 months ago, and it's what I want to buy. I don't feel like I'm getting a substandard creative team with a substandard character, and no offense to anyone out there who's writing these books.
Well, even if it's a great backup feature, it's going to take them, instead of getting enough for a trade of the lead feature, the feature, every 3 to 4 months, the time it would take to build up enough for that backup feature to have gotten a trade's worth of material is going to be like a year or something.
Yeah.
And just the slow serialization, I mean, there are some stories that can really make that work, but honestly, for me, it's been at least a decade or 2 since we've been seeing those getting told on a regular basis.
Well, again, I just want to throw in a little bit. It sounds like what both of you are saying is what you'd prefer is one full story over anything else.
It's not even a full story. It's just I want to get what I am paying for. If I want to get Action Comics, it's because I want the lead story.
Okay.
Even if it's a great Midnighter backup feature, which I didn't think it was, you're bundling that in with the lead feature and not giving me a choice.
Fair enough. I wonder, because while I kept writing single issues for several years afterwards, John, do you remember when Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray were writing Jonah Hex?
Yeah.
That's the last time I can think I was really excited to go to the shop and get a book every month and read it instantly. And what was unique about them is they were single issue stories.
Mm-hmm.
And no one else has done that since then.
That's not true.
I'll be honest, the 2 titles that for the longest time had that pull with the most amount of customers in our store were Saga and Walking Dead. I mean, we literally had people that would pay for those and then just move 3 feet down the counter and read it before they left the store because they wanted to read it right away. They didn't want it to be spoiled. And then it was even better if they could talk to someone about it. And, those were special books. And the only thing that we've had lately that has come remotely close to that was the Punchline stuff, the Joker War that Tynion was writing with Batman. It was the only thing that came close, and it wasn't quite to that level. But I mean, I'm telling you, we'd have, out of our subscribers, almost half of them, as soon as Walking Dead was paid for, they would just shift out and they'd start paging through it and they'd want to read it right away and see what happened.
Well, and I think Walking Dead's a great example because it's the epitome of a really well-told, gripping story that's not done in one stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Walking Dead was in between. Walking Dead's a good example. It's unique, though, but I mean, we've seen the book numbers. We saw the year, and Walking Dead sold 1 million books, too, because it wasn't exactly written for the issue either. It was kind of somewhere in between.
But it satisfied both. And that's what's special about it.
It was a serialized story that was satisfying in the individual chunks.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the book club that we did on Why the Last Man, where each issue, well, maybe there was 2 or 3 spots where they had 2 issue arcs, but it was generally each issue had a resolution of the previous problem and then left you on a cliffhanger for the next one. And it was just that rhythm where you were like, oh God, now I gotta wait again. But it still reads great in chunks as well.
Yeah, it reads great both ways. I read it both ways and it was terrific. Another one that's kind of like a done in one that right now is Black Cat's been doing a really good job with that. By Jed MacKay, he's been doing a terrific job.
That was one of the other ones I was going to mention, yeah. They've got an overarching story, but every issue tends to have a heist or something that has a beginning, middle, and end. But it's not boom, the story is done and you come in cold next issue. So it's not that I need a single self-contained story per issue, but I need something that has enough payoff and reward of some sense per issue to get me excited to come back for the next.
Fair enough. But that's the thing. A story's got to have a story, not a piece of a story. And having a beginning, middle, and end doesn't mean it doesn't continue. It's different than not being a story.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think any of us on this discussion are going to disagree that it takes a solid writer to write a story in multiple parts that keeps you coming back and happy and contented. Not necessarily happy as in the sense of, oh, the story makes me happy, but,
satisfied.
Satisfied. That's a great way of saying it. Yeah, satisfied. There's overwhelmingly larger amounts of stories that have none of that payoff per issue. And whether you're reading it out of habit, whether you're reading it because you love a character, you love the creator, whatever it is, I think what we've identified is that there's a clear formula for success on both sides of the aisle, whether it's in collected format, single issue format, whatever it is. And that's really a writing preference and a writing style of make it worth it. Give me something to leave the issue going, okay, but now there's still a question in my head.
And I think as the price has gone up over time, more and more people get to the point of, am I really getting that satisfaction per installment to justify the purchase?
Right.
And I think the backup story is not the right way to get that. Currently, with what I've seen.
Yeah. Do we want to keep going on this? Do we want to talk about the Marvel distribution stuff?
Let's go to Marvel.
Well, just to do a quick framing of that, Marvel decided, hey, we're going to switch distributors. They're going to Penguin Random House. Diamond's still going to be able to carry Marvel, but there's some definite changes in the works on this whole thing. Eric, what else do listeners need to know about this?
Yeah, this is like a 2-drink minimum topic. I don't even know, we can hit this from probably 3 easy angles, right? We've got the angle of what does this do to Diamond?
Mm-hmm.
We have the angle of how does this impact retailers from a bookstore competition standpoint,
mm-hmm.
and a new distributor. And then you've got the just straight up, what does this do for retailers side of things?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 3 different kind of paths to hit. Anybody got a specific one they want to start with?
I want to go with a 4th because you didn't mention it, and that's the reader perspective.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's an easy one for me to answer.
That's what I was going to say. For me as a reader, I think this is kind of a non-issue. I mean, DC left Diamond a year ago, so the advantages of the one-stop shopping ended then. And to me, this is less of a big deal than DC leaving Diamond, because Diamond will still be able to carry Marvel, so it's not like I'm worried about my retailer getting cut off or something. I do have a lot of concerns from an industry perspective. I think this is a much bigger deal, because like you said, could this destabilize Diamond? Absolutely. This could hurt other publishers getting access to stores. Depending how things go, it could make it much, much harder for new publishers to get into the market. And I think the flat 50% discount is a bit of a game changer. And I don't know if that's pro, con, and in which direction or something like that, but it's definitely changing the rules of comic book distribution in a way that's gonna have ramifications.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can hit that magic 4th one and get off it really quick. And that is, ultimately, as a reader and as a customer, it should just be white noise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. As a retailer, if somebody wants to ask me about the business like we're doing here, I'll be honest. I'll tell you where it hurts. I'll tell you, what sucks and what doesn't. But that's as a retailer. My job as a retailer is to get you the product you want. Right. I'm under no requirement to offer it to you at whatever discount I do. That's me making an intelligent decision based on margin and what I can do to offer the best competitive price possible to win the most amount of business. But at the end of the day, any retailer, it's incumbent on them to make sure that their customers get the product, and it shouldn't ultimately be an issue for the customer. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Did we satisfy that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say. I don't disagree with anything you said, Eric,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a very different tone than even you and James took when DC went to a new distributor on your own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. There was a ton of anger from readers over one, and this one's like, well, it's Marvel, so it's okay, we don't care.
Well, if you're driving and you run over a nail and you got a flat tire, you're running late and stuff, you're going to be upset. Okay, and when you look at it and you find out it wasn't one nail, but it was two, are you really that upset at the second nail?
And I guess I will point out, too, the anger and frustration that we had was at a retailer level, not as a reader, right? And I'll be honest, there's just as much frustration with this change as there was with DC.
I do find it really interesting. I kind of took your position as, hey, that's the job of the industry, that's the job of the reseller. Figure out how to get me the product, I'll decide if I want to buy it or not. I said that when DC did it, I say it now when Marvel does. Mm-hmm. I do find it very interesting that the vast majority of people I heard about this were very angry with DC, and with Marvel, they go, well, yeah, it's business, life goes on, whatever.
No, I mean, that may be the external way that it looks, but I'm on all the inside retailer boards and everything, and I'm seeing all the comments, and the reaction really is, here we freaking go again, is kind of the reaction. And of course, the first one is always going to get the most vocal and visceral reaction because it's the first one. The second one, it's like, well, all right, we've been through this crap fest before, so we kind of know what to expect, even though it sucks.
I remember the YouTube videos of, I will never carry another DC book in my comic store again.
Yep.
Where are those videos on, I'll never carry another Marvel book in my store again? They don't exist.
Little different, though. This is totally different in how the shift has happened.
Yeah. I mean, one, this isn't the first time Marvel's left a distributor.
No.
It was the first time DC had done it. And also, when DC did it, we went from one-stop shopping to no longer having that. So Marvel leaving Diamond didn't cause that kind of seismic shift.
And I want to point out, the reason that people made videos saying they were no longer going to carry DC product was not because DC left Diamond. It had nothing to do with them leaving. It had everything to do with who they went to, our competitors. They chose to take distribution to the two single largest comic stores in America. And that was what chapped a lot of people. They said, well, you're cutting me out from underneath me. You're cutting my legs up from underneath me. You just want to go straight to the consumer. It's obvious. We can see that you're going in. And, at the time, DC was even advertising on their website. If you wanted to buy a DC product, you went straight to the Midtown site. Like, all of their links took you to Midtown. They didn't take you to a generic DC page. It took you right to Midtown. So that was the frustration and why people were like, well, you know what? You clearly told me you don't need me because you've got your own path. So why should I stock your product? Now, it's a short-sighted opinion, but that's why the reaction was so much harsher.
But isn't that still true? Go to Penguin's website right now. Dark Horse, DC, I know are both carried, but you can order direct from them right now. You have been able to.
But remember, they were distributors first, and they are distributors. They aren't our direct competition on an equal playing ground. They're not a comic book specialty shop. They're a Penguin Random House bookseller.
No, they're a book specialty shop. They're a bookseller.
Right, but you don't see your local bookstore getting up in arms because you can order things direct from Penguin Random House, right? But if let's just pick, whatever publisher you want for books says, Penguin Random House is no longer our distributor. Barnes & Noble is our distributor. That's going to get a lot of people frustrated. That's the difference.
Yeah, I would imagine Books A Million would be a little upset, or some of their other competitors, actually. Yeah.
Right. That's the difference. And so with Marvel going to Penguin Random House, the first reaction is, oh, Jesus, here we go again. Like, why do we have to cause more chaos for ourselves? There is a significant amount of frustration across the board in a lot of different areas, and for a lot of different people, it's different things. So this is not one of those like, whatever, the industry moves on type things. It is a big issue, but because they are going to an established distributor, whether or not they've distributed, comics, let's not talk about that, but the fact that they've been set up as a distributor of printed material, they have a process in place. They already have ordering mechanisms. They already have distribution, fulfillment centers, all of those things. The mechanics are there. And so now we're focusing more on where's the data coming from? What does our discount tier look like? We're starting to get more down to the brass tacks of what is this business interaction going to be, as opposed to, who the heck is this group? Oh, that's our competitor. Oh, they've never done this before. Oh, that's nice.
Well, and I think some of the other differences is Penguin Random House was a known quantity versus who is Lunar, who is UCS, and that being kind of hidden for a little bit. And also with this change, since Diamond can still continue to carry Marvel books, it doesn't put all the retailers in the position of instantly having to go open another account somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
They've got at least a little time to think about it.
I know there were some shops that had credit with Diamond, and when they went to Lunar, they weren't able to establish credit terms because maybe they're financially not in the position they should be in, and so those people are left in the dust.
But that could happen with Penguin, too.
But they could stay with Diamond because Diamond's still going to keep the Marvel books.
Okay, but in theory, couldn't Diamond have kept the DC books and just bought them from the distributor the same as they're doing this time?
No, I don't think that was an option.
It was, that was not an option DC offered to Diamond.
Otherwise, Diamond would still be offering DC books.
Correct.
Wait a minute. Diamond's a free business. They couldn't call one of the distributors and set up an account like anybody else?
Apparently not.
That doesn't sound right. That sounds more like a choice.
Here's another difference. So with DC Comics, they honor the same discount tiers that they had at Diamond.
Mm-hmm.
They literally just picked up shop and moved it over.
Yep.
So there's multiple tiers of discounts, and it's all based on your invoiced amounts.
Yep.
With Marvel shifting to Penguin Random House, it is a level playing field. Everyone gets the same discount, which is terrible for stores that sell more product and good for stores that sell less.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, in a most extreme case, and like this is probably less than 5% of all stores, their discount was 35%. So now they're getting an extra 15% discount, which is good for them.
Mm-hmm.
But for those of us on the upper end of the tier, by going to a flat 50%, we could be sacrificing up to 9%. And that's significant. And on top of that, the loudest voice in the comic book retailer echo chamber has been championing for a couple of years plus that everyone should move to Penguin Random House because they offer free shipping. Well, see, here's the problem. That particular retailer doesn't really want to run a comic store. This person wants to run a bookstore, but he wants it to be full of cool comics in book format. And so what this retailer does is they order from Penguin Random House in book format. And they love it because they get bunches of stuff and they get it at free shipping. But their bill to Diamond is maybe 10 or 11% of their bill is shipping because they're not ordering enough to get a reasonable discount. I've done the math on our shipping, and it represents less than 3% of our invoices on average. I would much rather pay for my shipping and have an additional 6% discount than give it up for free shipping.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm not saying that's not true. But again, that's a volume and size thing. Smaller stores, they're getting bigger discounts and no shipping, could be getting as much as a 25 to 30% discount advantage now than they had previously.
They could, but what is my incentive to order more in now, right? Because I would take a chance and order extra books because I have the discount, because I have...
I understand.
But I don't have that now.
I understand
theoretically.
And I understand that. But again, the question then becomes, and arguably Penguin's been doing this for a decade or more with the independent booksellers. They've really been cultivating more smaller stores than larger ones. I mean, that's something they've just been doing in the market anyways, the specialty bookstore.
Yeah, but let's face it, for the most part, excluding like the big comic book retailers, even a large comic book retailer is, I would think, tiny compared to, your average bookstores and things in other venues and stuff.
Really? I would say a decent... I'm trying to think of I've got a local bookstore that I go to that specializes in mysteries. He's probably about the same size as a couple of the comic stores I go to.
Historically, most of the bookstores I've been in, back when they were at malls or even standalone bookstores and stuff, had a bigger physical footprint than most comic stores I've been in. Again, excluding the huge stores.
Well, but when you're getting into malls and stuff, now you're talking that weird chain thing that existed in the 80s, the B. Dalton and stuff. I'm really talking about modern independent booksellers, which tend to be more specialty, genre-driven, and most of them are the size of medium to large-size comic bookstores.
Okay, I guess just my experience has been most of them have been more towards the larger non-mega comic stores. In other words, I'm weeding out like the Forbidden Planet, the Midtowns, the ones that start getting into like your average, Barnes & Noble size store kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah, but the average bookstore that I'm talking about is a fifth of, not even, a tenth of the size, or much smaller than your average Barnes & Noble, too.
Agreed, but most of the comic stores I've been in have been smaller than that. And I think it's also a matter of just the amount of business they're doing and stuff. I think the flat discount is definitely going to be good for those smaller stores, but let's face it, they're smaller in terms of sales. That's why it's not going to be that big of a deal to probably Marvel or Penguin Random House to be offering that better discount versus they're taking it off of the people who'd been getting over the 50% discount. We're doing a much bigger volume.
I also think that, we're kind of comparing apples and tires, because when you think about a small bookstore, Sam, the likelihood that a small genre-driven bookstore is in a city of 4,000 people is highly unlikely. But you can find comic shops all over the U.S. in cities of 4,000 people. And no matter what their discount tier is, unless they're doing something Herculean like mail order like we are, they just don't have the population to add a significant amount of readers. So they get the extra discount. That's great for them. They're making a little bit more profit on the little bit that they sell, and it's going to sustain them. It's going to probably make it a little bit better for them. But again, I view it as I don't want to say you're punishing me, because that they're giving us a discount. Okay, we're not being punished, but it does have a negative effect, and that negative effect will have some sort of a ripple across the industry in some fashion. It may not be drastic, it may not be significant, but it could be something. I will say though that while we are, aptly comparing the different houses of what Penguin Random House will have, one with bookstores and one with specialty stores, it is important to point out that after the fact, we did get notice that the Marvel floppy comic distribution would be for direct market stores only. It won't be going into those local bookstores. And that was a huge concern as soon as this was announced. One of our good friends who runs a store also in Wisconsin is one of two comic stores in his area. The population is, let's just say the metro population area for that part of the state is between 150 and 200,000 people. So he and this other comic store can coexist without any issues. But they have 7 independent bookstores around them. And he had heart palpitations when he found out that the 7 stores where they buy the bulk of their product from is now going to be carrying his product. He was initially very concerned. Now we've learned that that's not going to be the case, but might have been a good point to have in that first FAQ document they created.
Why is that not the case? Again, if you're thinking of the comic industry, wouldn't having all those stores, and we've talked about this before, more comics in more places is better for comics, not for individual stores necessarily.
I think theoretically it's better. I don't know that practically we've seen that play out.
But Marvel going to a place, and again, thinking of a store, an independent bookseller that I know, I don't go there very much, but I do know of them, that specializes in science fiction. Them putting in a rack of comics would be good for comics.
Would it?
It certainly couldn't hurt.
That would be arguing a chain along the lines of like a Barnes & Noble and stuff, putting in a section on comics and stuff would be great for the industry, and we'd see a mass upswell in sales and such.
It didn't work.
We saw it with Hastings, and it made zero difference.
You are correct. But you don't think more stores is better than fewer?
More is better than fewer if it's the right stores and stuff. But one of the things I'd read on the beat was, this could mean more comics and more outlets with both mores in uppercase. And I'm like, really? How? Why? I mean, surely it could happen, but no more or less than it could before. And the rationale that the beat had was that everyone that sells books is dealing with Penguin Random House. Okay, that makes sense. So Marvel books and periodics will eventually be more outlets to be seen in. That's why Marvel did this. They'll just sell tons and tons more. Well, better access to the market. Sure, that makes sense. That's good, but that doesn't necessarily equate to more sales automatically. I don't think that comics have the price point, the reward on investment, or however you want to phrase that and stuff that we were just talking about on the price point discussion, that if suddenly it's in every, small bookstore in America, that suddenly comics are going to be flying off the shelves.
No.
If I'm looking at a $4.99 comic book compared to a $7.99 novel of, 300-400 pages versus this has got 22 pages, that's a fraction of a comic book story. which is kind of a drop in the bucket to a full-blown novel.
I don't disagree, but if because of the news and the other things, it can do two things. One, it could start putting more trades, which in theory have always been available, but now that in theory Penguin's going to have sales reps and stuff working specifically in this division, give them a little more of a reason to push some of those to the right stores. And in theory, it could also then comic stores that are not 100% comics, which almost no comic store I know of is, could get into potentially the book market as well in some places that aren't necessarily just graphic novels.
So yeah, the reason that there's kind of different rules for different players is because there's different rules for different players. So our direct market accounts are non-returnable, just like they are with Diamond. The bookstores have returnable accounts, which is why they're not giving access to the direct market, because that's changing their terms of engagement and how they handle their book sales and everything. So there's nothing to say that a small bookstore couldn't choose to shift to a direct market account, but they would then lose access to a significant amount of the Penguin Random House catalog. Just like us being a direct market store, we don't have access to, all the Michael Crichton novels, Stephen King, and all of that kind of stuff, because that comes out of a completely different, it's literally a different physical warehouse. Penguin Random House just bought a big facility right next to Diamond Comics, and that's essentially where they're going to set up shop for this distribution. So they have a different facility. It's the same stock as far as Marvel Collected Editions, but it is different ways of how you get your discount and what you can do, and you can't pick and choose. So like James and I can't say, well, for all of our single issues, we're going to obviously do it the route that we have to, but for all of our trades, we are going to take a lesser discount for returnability, and we're going to get 10 times as much as we normally would. It doesn't work that way. You can't a la carte it. So that's part of the shift and the change and why there's a division between the two.
So in many ways, they didn't go to Penguin Random House. They just went to some random other new distributor.
Correct. They went to Marvel Direct Market Distribution serviced by Penguin Random House. So they're using the Penguin Random House infrastructure, like all the systems that are there, which are, I'm not going to lie, 1,000 times better than Diamond. Diamond is, antiquated. They do have dedicated service reps. Diamond did away with those. However, one of the service reps that are, I don't know what his official title is going to be at Penguin Random House is Matthew Klein from Valiant, which was kind of talked about on our Slack channel a little bit. And Matthew's smart enough to know, like, if he's going to be calling stores to try and sell stuff, it doesn't work necessarily like a bookstore where you can, say like, oh, you're in you're a mystery novel store. Well, we've got this hot new artist or creator that's coming out, this writer, and they've got, this first book that's launching on this time. You should take in 15 of them. It ain't going to work for a lot of stores because we know our market, we know our business. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Penguin handles kind of the stodgy direct market in a sense, and also how the direct market interacts with new tools, new technology, and new ways to pull things in. It does cause a lot of headaches all around technology-wise when you're talking about, I think, 70% of direct market stores that have a point-of-sale solution utilize Diamond's point-of-sale solution. They have worked it out, so all the DC product is in there. Obviously, they'll have Marvel product because they are going to be considered a wholesaler of Marvel product. But that does, it adds a layer of complexity. How do you handle subscriptions and stuff? So there's all of those pieces, too, that retailers have to worry about. Where do we get our source data from? How do we interact with it? So it's going to be a learning curve. Like John said, we are set up for less failure because we've gone through it with DC. I'm not going to say we're necessarily set up for success, but we're set up for less failure because we know it didn't work. And so we can avoid that. But there's going to be learning. There's going to be bumps.
Well, yeah, but again, if you don't get access to the rest of Penguin's catalog and the rest of Penguin's customers don't get access to the comic catalog, this is a even more behind the scenes move than it appeared.
Right, and that's the way it's shaping up right now. Nothing is in practice yet because the first product that they will be shipping is in October. And we can't start placing orders for things until May, and that's going to be for things like trades and hardcovers that have a long lead time. So we don't even know fully how this is going to play out. Our account, we set up our account the day that we got the announcement, or I should say submitted all of our paperwork. We still haven't even gotten our account created yet. There's obviously an influx of probably 3,000 stores that hit them up to create an account. So there's still a lot that we have to see, but as of today, that's the information that we know. And so, like you said, Sam, it's a lot less of a shift than maybe at first appeared.
Do you have any idea, because I know there are not an insignificant, I'm sure it's not a huge portion, but not none. Do you know how this will affect the direct market stores that already had Penguin book accounts?
I think they'll end up with two accounts, probably. One that they'll keep for anything that's So the thing that we don't know is how
I thought you just said they weren't allowed to have both.
Well, because they already have one, they're kind of grandfathered in a sense. Because they're already buying comics from Diamond, and they were utilizing Penguin Random House for stocking their graphic novels from, say, Boom, DC, Marvel, whatever it be. That's the thing, like, we don't know how that's going to shake out. We don't know what kind of access we're going to have to all of the publishers that sell graphic novels that Penguin Random House has. We don't know if it's going to be one of those things where they say, okay, here's the deal. You have access to Marvel floppies, and any publisher who's part of the direct market, you have access to their trades and hardcovers. Or is it, we don't know. We don't fully know how it's all going to shake out, but.
So you have no idea, like, if you're going to get all the Scholastic stuff.
Correct. And if we do I do know that if we do have access to that, it will not be at a returnable discount tier, which is less than what our discount tier is, but it's returnable. We would get it, I believe, at the discount tiers that we at least get through Diamond, but it's not returnable. But it's, again, we don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah. Much of what you're describing sounds like a terrible deal for the comic shops, unfortunately.
Yes.
I mean, if you got the same deal Penguin had been given to everybody else, it would be one thing. But again, it's just like, oh, we just set up a new distributor with worse terms than Diamond, and you're still having to deal with all the crappy direct market terms.
Yep.
And yet another distributor.
Yep.
Because at this point, if you want DC, you got to go with Lunar. If you want Marvel now, you've got the option of going Penguin Random House or staying with Diamond, whichever way works better for you. But if you do go Penguin Random House, it's not like you're probably going to drop your Diamond stuff if you've got any decent business in Image, Dark Horse, and all those other publishers. And what that's going to do for all of those other publishers is drop your discount over there because you're doing less business through Diamond.
Right.
So even if this winds up being a good change for the industry long term, and I'm not convinced if it will or won't be that, it's going to be a bumpy transition and does have the potential of causing some damage in the direct market as it goes along.
I think the damage is going to come to Diamond personally. I question if Diamond can withstand losing at the first part a third of their business, and now they're looking at losing with what's left over. Marvel's easily 60% of that. And there's a long tail of liabilities of paying back the comic book publisher for those notes while you're not getting any income for that stuff.
Well, and if it does take down Diamond, the repercussions on that, based on the last distributor wars we'd seen, decades ago, you saw publishers and retailers going under, and that just reverberated across the industry.
That's what I worry about. I always said when Marvel made the move to go and create and set up their own distribution back in the 90s.
With the Heroes World stuff.
With the Heroes World. That, it took a while, but it played out where we had a monopoly after years, and we closed multiple distributors. There's publishers that went under. There's stores that went under, probably.
By multiple distributors and stuff, it went from literally about 3 or 4 dozen to about 2 or 3 down to eventually just the one. And that happened in, I want to say, about a 2 or 3 year period.
Yeah, it takes a little bit for it to shake out. So when DC made their move, I was wondering how long it would take for the other shoe to drop. And now the other shoe has dropped. And for me, it's just a matter of time. It may take a couple of years, but I don't think Diamond can withstand it personally. Maybe they can. I don't know.
I think it's really going to depend how many people move how much of their business of Marvel sales away from Diamond.
Yeah, because if I'm Image or if I am Dark Horse, if I'm IDW, I'm feeling a little nervous right now being exclusive with Diamond. I'm going to be calling Penguin Random House because I don't think Lunar can handle it. I don't know what I'm going to do.
I tell you what I'd be doing if I were 1 or 2 particular people over at Image.
What's that?
I'd be talking with Diamond.
That too.
Specifically about potentially buying them.
That could be another thing. That would be interesting.
Because if you've got money like, Walking Dead money or something like that, and I don't know how much Kirkman's got, but conceivably he or McFarlane or somebody
I was going to say, nowhere close to what McFarlane has.
Yeah, but they may have enough to do this, and the question is, could Diamond essentially downscale appropriately if it lost Marvel's stuff, and basically position Image to where they're not only a publisher, but a distributor and stuff too, and put them in a much better position to kind of, act as a bit more of an umbrella kind of a deal for all the other publishers.
The small publishers, so it will take care of you.
Well, there's a few things here at play, and actually a couple of them tie into one of the discussion points with Diamond that I wanted to have, which is a timeline of events and some of the fallout therein. So, if you gentlemen will indulge me a little bit here.
Sure.
May 16th of 2019, Cheppy hires Stan Heidman, who's a PepsiCo executive really tasked with essentially optimizing the logistics of the operations and taking a deep look at inefficiencies across all the business. Meanwhile, at the same time, around that same time, all of Jeppy's 9 companies that he owns are umbrellaed under Jeppy Enterprises. So you have E. Gerber, you have his museum, you have Diamond Select Toys, you have Diamond Distributors, you have Alliance Gaming, and some other little periphery things here and there, all now roll up into this Jeppy Enterprises. And Stan comes in to kind of cut the fat. September 25th, 2019, an overall new leadership team is announced. This is the promotion of some of their internal people to C-suite level roles that oversee more than just Diamond Comics. They now start to oversee other areas. You see senior leaders from other business groups that now become like chiefs of staff and other things underneath these C-suite folks. So that's all in 2019. Then the pandemic hits, and June of 2020, DC leaves or announces they are leaving Diamond Comics, stating that they've been trying to work out a long-term solution for a year and had no success and chose to leave. Well, if I trace my timeline back a year, that takes me to when Stan Heidman was hired. Now here comes the fun part. June of 2020, DC leaves. July 2nd of 2020, Heidman leaves, and Jeppy retakes over the role of president of Jeppy Enterprises.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know if that's just pure happenstance that this individual comes in, starts cutting the fat and taking a look at things. The number 2 publisher leaves, and then a month later, all of a sudden, this man disappears out of the Jeppy Enterprises system, and based on his LinkedIn page, doesn't appear to have any other jobs going on right now. That seems a little odd, and, I don't know if some of the practices that were put into place by this larger corporate experienced individual, because I think we could say PepsiCo is probably dealing in a little bit larger scale work than Diamond is, and he might have brought some business tactics and techniques that weren't necessarily appreciated in the direct market.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because isn't there the risk that Penguin Random House would have a bit more of kind of a corporate attitude and feel to it than Diamond does, historically?
They certainly could, but I would argue to say that they are at least in a book market, so they understand print media.
Fair enough.
And, PepsiCo is really all about food product and distribution. And obviously, maybe there's probably some people out there that view Pepsi cans and other things as collectibles, but I think by and large, the 95% plus of the product they're doing is consumable.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with comics and the like, you have to treat it as a collectible. So, yeah, I just noticed that, and I found that that's a really interesting timeline of events. It seems like there might be a connection there, and the only thing to say that I think Diamond may stand a chance to weather this storm is not because of the remaining publishers left that they have with distribution, but actually because of the other business entities that Jeppy has. And it's not uncommon for those people who own multiple businesses to claim losses on one that are offset by, profits on another. So Alliance, now that they have exclusive distribution of certain products, Alliance may be doing gangbusters, and if Diamond is losing money, okay. Likewise, Diamond Select Toys is actually a pretty significant player in the toy market right now. It's, relatively decent quality toys, priced that are, a little bit under McFarlane toys, and therefore we see good sales with that stuff. So all that to say, I guess we don't know. Diamond could go one of two ways. I just think that timeline is interesting.
Hey, John, I was just going to say, I had a limited time to be here, and I'm going to appreciate listening to the rest of this on my own.
Okay.
But thanks for having me, guys, and sorry I have to run. And if you need anything or if I think of anything, I'll send everyone messages or I'll put info on the Slack, okay?
Cool. Thanks for joining us for as long as you could.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Have a great evening, James.
Thanks, guys. Sorry to break up the party.
Nope,
No
not a
worries. We'll
problem.
talk to you soon.
All right, take care, guys. All right, bye.
So, Eric, the question I've got for you is, there are a couple of ways this could play out that could actually work well for Diamond, a few that could work very poorly for Diamond. I mean, obviously, there's the potential risk of DC, going to Penguin Random House, at which point, things could quickly get to where they become the sole distributor in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Or flip side, they could decide, it's, they could stay with Lunar. They could decide, hey, let's not do that. They could go back to Diamond. That could keep Diamond around.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle that we should touch on in a little bit.
Can we stop for 1 second just to go back?
I just want to add one quick thing before we get off of that, though, about
Okay.
DC going to Penguin Random House, is that's probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because according to one of the articles on the beat, that Penguin can't distribute Marvel books to bookstores because of a clause in DC's contract with Penguin Random House. But there's some existing contractual things across companies that we don't have full visibility into that could play into this. And then how that plays out, I don't know. It comes down to if Lunar stumbles, that could save Diamond. Flip side, if Diamond stumbles, that could help Lunar or whoever, depending where the other publishers go.
Yeah. Actually, you know what, Sam? Why don't you go to your stuff and then let's circle back on DC.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I was just going to say, you made the excellent point. Alliance and that deal they brokered with Wizards of the Coast alone, Jeppy Enterprises is going no place. That Hasbro Alliance deal is more than enough to keep that business and several others running for several years to come.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of it, yeah. That Wizards deal's unbelievable that they got.
You got Wizard, you got Asmodee, you've got,
Yep.
It's getting, yeah.
You can probably talk to this, Eric. It upset the distribution market in the gaming field quite a bit.
There are not enough curse words in the English language to cover the headaches that has caused.
Not to mention the other distributors in that world that are upset or out of business and other things as well.
Yep.
It does make me wonder how much of Diamond's future and Geppy Enterprises in general is really tied to Steve Geppy and his leadership.
Yeah. There's an Oz curtain there that we don't know what goes on behind. We don't know how much. I know his son is involved a great deal, and I think a daughter, maybe it's a daughter-in-law, but to what extent, no idea. The thing that's really, really, really frustrating is that since DC left, the level of access that direct market stores have had to anyone at Diamond is basically disappeared. Like, we used to be able to contact a dedicated rep, and a rep, it wasn't like a one-to-one. A rep could have 50 stores or 100 stores, depending what but we at least had a person that we could reach out to and say, hey, can you look into this for me? That disappeared. We always had a failback. Anyone who's deep into the comics industry knows that Nance is pretty much the reason that Diamond continues to run. She was just the wizard that could find any answer, would help you, always did it with a smile. One of the most amazing people to be with and work with. Even responses from her, gone. And I have to imagine it's because she's just inundated and overworked. And so, like, the whole thing from the Diamond side has just been a continuance of a downhill trajectory since DC left, which is frustrating. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I definitely think the Diamond we've got today is, I think, fundamentally different than the Diamond we had a little over a year ago before all this went down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Diamond stopped releasing sales data with the shutdown a year ago. After that, they released unindexed lists in, I think, July, August, September, and October of 2020, which was just, it's ranked, but you can't convert it to units. But then after that, just nothing.
Yeah. I mean, and I do want to say, like, there have been some things that have changed for the better. The process of fulfillment shipping when you do reorders. There's a lot of stores that don't like it, but I actually kind of enjoy it where they'll consolidate down a week's worth of reorders and ship it at once. If you need something right away, you can still direct ship it. So I actually do kind of appreciate that. They've done a few things for damage and shortage used to have to call them in or email a rep, and now there's an actual entry screen that we can use. So there's a few things that they've done that I will say are good, but the lack of access to knowledgeable staff is a real killer.
How many of those beneficial things were to reduce the touch points on the people at Diamond?
Well, I think the reorder consolidation weekly shipping was done to try and mitigate shipping expenses, right? The more you put into a box, the cheaper it gets to ship over per unit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was done to try and both on the Diamond side to help because they subsidized the shipping. So it was done for their benefit, but also because a lot of stores complained about outrageous shipping charges for one single book. Well, Doofus, you reordered one book. What did you expect?
Yeah.
So that I think was more on that side. The shortage in damages is definitely reducing a touch point because that was their number one congestion on phone lines for support reps was everybody calling in their shortages of damages.
Yeah.
And, not a week goes by that there isn't something. And that's going to happen with Penguin Random House. It's going to happen with Lunar. So that is what it is. But yeah, I think it's just all in all, they're trying to cut down service a little bit, which is interesting because it's the opposite of Penguin Random House.
Yeah, but I think the problem with Penguin Random House potentially is going to be that they're having to spin up a lot of things. They're having to, establish what's their process going to be for returns or damages or this, that, and the other. Versus Diamond, which has been in this space for decades. They're not perfect, but they do have a routine, good, bad, or indifferent. And it's just going to be interesting to see how well Penguin Random House on the comic side, how quickly and how well they can spin that up. If they do well enough out of the gate not to kind of poison the well before they're too deeply in it, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think there was enough bumps in the road this time last year with some of the spin up at UCS and Lunar that kind of, didn't go over well with some retailers, and understandably so.
Yeah. We're going to see, we're going to see what happens. But, it's interesting if we're ready to kind of shift back to the DC discussion.
Mm-hmm.
The potential opportunity out there that you talked about, John, with Jeppy maybe bringing DC into Diamond is not far-fetched because there was a short list of people with deep pockets interested in purchasing DC from AT&T/Warner Media for the publishing rights. Now, that would not be for the film rights or anything like that, but just for the publishing side of things. And the front runner is Jeppy.
That would be interesting, and he's got publishing stuff already with Gemstone, so it's not like he'd be completely new to the space.
Obviously, he knows how to distribute it. So yeah, that would be an interesting wrinkle. Naturally, he would probably, I don't see how he wouldn't pull it from Lunar and put it in his own warehouse, but
oh, that'd be a given, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that is something out there, and who knows? The exodus of Marvel could hasten that decision. Now, the things that I don't know how well he would be able to handle right out of the gates would be, publishing Diamond previews and, things of that nature, more catalog-based things are very different than managing creative talent, editorial, storyboards. So that would be interesting. But if he hires the right people, it should happen.
But he's had Gemstone for ages, and Gemstone used to do like the Disney comics and stuff, and even some of the other people involved with that have been editors at other companies and have some contacts. So I think he could build up that side of the business pretty quickly if he needed to.
Right.
He knows everybody in the comic industry.
Right.
And it's one of the few cases, because I was trying to figure out when I heard that, there was the possibility of somebody kind of buying DC for the print rights, but the movies and stuff would obviously stay with Warner and they could do whatever they wanted with them. I'm like, well, the big money's in the movies, so why would somebody want just the comics? Jeppy in having now that volume to kind of keep Diamond going and stuff, that makes sense to me.
Well, and who's to say how the value is in the movie properties if done right, correct? And same thing with licensing products and television shows. But you'd have to assume, at least I would think, if somebody had publishing rights and things were being published from a certain time period on, they would probably try and work some sort of agreement in that they would receive compensation for that too. So, I mean, there is potential for additional revenue.
Well, and also, if Jeppy were to go after it, I would think he would want to have toy right potential as well. So...
Right, certainly at least something like out of the Diamond Select toys, whether or not it's, the DC Direct, he might at least be able to bargain for being able to utilize his own line of toys.
Yeah, he would, if he were smart, and he's no idiot, he would go after some of the additional rights and stuff beyond just literally printing the comics.
Which I thought they just signed. Didn't they just sign some sort of thing with McFarlane Toys? So that could be a little bit trickier.
Yeah, I was going to say, Warner
Yeah,
Brothers...
but that would play out over time.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. Even if what you're saying is correct, the money's in the movies and the licensing of those characters, which we all agree it probably is, protecting them is more important than anything. Which means editorial oversight on licensed books would be a disaster. And I'm not sure if I'm a comic publisher, I'd even want to deal with that.
I don't know that the concept of DC kind of being, letting somebody else publish DC Comics, I haven't heard anything that implied Warner would be overseeing the content. Just, hey, go do what you want to do, and if we can milk it for movies, we will.
There is no way. Again, if you've got a $1 billion Batman film coming out, and someone you have licensed the rights to puts out something offensive in a Batman comic book, there's no way Warner's having no control over that.
I just haven't heard that as part of the discussions. I'm not saying it's not there, just that it hadn't been spoken of.
Yeah, exactly. And my guess is that's one of the big sticking is how much control and all that sense of other things.
Oh yeah, not only how much control, but if you create something new, how does it go? Who gets what rights and who has control over it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It would be a pretty impressive deal if somebody could make that work. But I think at this point, where the industry is at right now is different than where it was just, a few weeks ago, and is going to be different again probably by the end of the year and moving forward after that. Because by the end of the year, Penguin Random House will actually be distributing books, so we'll see if that's gone smoothly. If it hasn't, how that's impacted DC, Diamond, Marvel, everybody.
Right.
And some people are going to be better off with it, and some people may not be. It's just a question of what percentages and how big of a deal it is.
Yeah.
I see these things, and it's definitely we're in a period of significant change for the industry, but for me, it's really hard to see what's likely to happen in the future, where it's likely to go and stuff, just because there's some key information we just don't have these days. How sales have been over the past year is some of that, what some of the contractual concerns are, what people are wanting to happen at the higher-ups at Marvel, Penguin Random House, DC, etc. So, and how this could impact the other publishers could be very interesting. It could work out potentially very well for them, but I think it's got more likely to have a big downside if things go poorly. And certainly I think it is in all the other publishers' best interest to either keep Diamond healthy or find a viable alternative, or ideally both.
Yeah, it's possible. Like I said, now that Eric's kind of discussed it, being distributed by Penguin's infrastructure, but not Penguin, changes the equation on this a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, they've got existing distribution knowledge and stuff, but to an extent, they are still spinning up a new division and a new entity, and maybe they've got the leadership that's going to go really smooth. Again, maybe there's some bumps in the roads. We just don't know yet.
Yeah. Eric, anything?
Nothing that we haven't already talked about other than to say, this is going to be evolving, right, on all fronts.
Yeah.
It's going to evolve in how Penguin handles accounts. It's going to be, evolving in how distribution and the mechanics work. And the fallout is going to be an evolution, right? What happens with Diamond, what happens with DC. And I think that it's something that this group is going to be back talking about in 6 months, probably 6 months after that, if not sooner.
Yeah. No, I think we should do these sorts of roundtables on occasion. As to how frequently, I'll let you guys kind of chime in on that as time goes on. But certainly, it was funny because we had originally planned on doing this simply on the news of the price and format stuff at DC. And then, again, the Marvel distribution change happened. I'm certain there'll be similar points in the future where we should all get back together and see what's going on.
Yeah,
Yep,
absolutely.
Anything else?
I'm good.
I'm good.
And James is already gone, so I think he's good.
Well, if he's not, he's just going to have to do it on his own.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll tell me on the next monthly comic spotlight. All right, cool. The show notes and forum for this podcast can be found at www.comicbookpage.com under the podcast and forum sections of the website. Please email us at theguys@comicbookpage.com and let us know what you think of what was discussed in this episode. Thanks for listening.